drives economic development. And I'm sure we will all agree that that's a very topical issue, given the moment that we are in. You will recall that during the first session, we spoke extensively about improving the state of university-industry collaboration in Nigeria, because that is the first stage to building a viable innovation space in the country. We are following up with that today, and our focus today will be more around policies that will drive innovation, that will catalyze innovation from different sectors in the economy. We are privileged to be joined today by Barrister Mohammad Abdullahi, the Honourable Minister of State for Science and Technology. We also have with us Mrs. Onyeche Tifase, the Managing Director of Siemens Nigeria. She's also a member of the NESG board. Mazi Ohuabunwa is the President of the Pharmaceutical Society of Nigeria. And we have Dr. Salihu Gire Bakari, the Director of Research and Development and the Center of Excellence, representing the Executive Secretary of the Tertiary Education Trust Fund, who is unavoidably absent. I will now invite the Honourable Minister of State, Barrister Mohammad Abdullahi, to give us his opening remarks. Honourable Minister, sir.
All right, thank you. You can hear me, right? Can you hear me?
You can hear you.
Oh, lovely, all right. Let me first and foremost commend the Nigerian Economic Summit Group for this continuing initiative, to drive the country towards economic, sorry, apparently my this has gone off. Can you hear me, sir? It's a technical problem.
We can hear you.
Oh, okay. Okay, so like I said, I commend the Nigeria Economic Summit Group for this very wonderful and continued initiative, basically aimed at, placing the country, to undergo these current challenges we're facing, both in terms of, the various challenges we're facing, both from the perspective of the economy and our health systems. I appreciate that for also giving the honor to give my opening remarks. You are quite aware that Nigeria, like the rest of the world, has recognized that the essence and lessons we are learning from this pandemic, this COVID-19 pandemic, is that it has, in no small measure, drive one important message, that we must begin to look at innovations that are homegrown, that are also equally globally robust, so that we can survive as a nation. So I see that a robust science, technology, and innovation ecosystem is a key that will determine our progress and ability to fast track our industrial growth and services. Now, I understand the main theme of this engagement is to see how innovation can drive economic development in the country. Of course, from the perspective of the Science Ministry, we have been able to underscore and understand the fact that our strategy as a nation and vision, must be aligned to the development of science and technology, so that we can drive innovation, that can have a ripple effect in what we do in our economy. So what we do in the ministry first is to, first and foremost, understand that our institutions that are under our ministry must begin to think outside the box, must begin to think, of being very innovative, must begin to realize that their R&D outcomes must be outcomes that are not only competitive, but that can be commercialized based on demand-driven or market-driven factors. So at the moment, we are trying to redirect our energies from the normal research institutes, to a research institute that is geared towards achieving results for the benefit, of the country, so that we can drive commercialization, we can drive competitiveness, which in turn will result in industrial growth that will create jobs, that will equally create wealth and alleviate poverty in the country. Now, we have part of our initiatives in this regard is therefore to look at the science and technology parks, which we develop a liaison with UNESCO. Yes, I will admit that over the years, it has met some challenges of funding and it has not fully been operational. So when we came on board, what we try to do is to understand how important the technology park is, because it is a park that can encourage, matchmaking initiatives, matchmaking platforms, between a developer of a particular technology or R&D outcome and then, commercial entities. So we have governance our energy, towards revamping that project so that we can create a sufficient and efficient platform, for transfer of scientific and technological breakthroughs from both the academia and the research institutes. We're also using the platform of the park to ensure that we encourage startups by providing very cheap spaces, and where they can also leverage your infrastructure like power, water, and broadband infrastructure, that will be available for them to upscale, in terms of their inventions. Again, we're trying to create a platform through NOTAP that will support patenting of such findings, so that a particular inventor or researcher can feel so safe, can feel so comfortable that his research will not be plagiarized or copyrighted to someone's advantage. Now, to support this initiative also, we have the technology incubation centers across the state. What they do usually is to create some kind of cluster, some tech cluster projects that will be supported, by what I call, not the high level investor, but medium-term investors that could look at small investment. Small creativity, and see how they can partner with such researchers and see how they can develop that to some extent, to commercialize it. Again, we have been able to, through a lot of policies that have been churned out over the years, over the last 2-3 years by this administration, to ensure that we support STI development. Now, of course, the starting point is the STI roadmap, which envisages that in the next 10 years, where we hope to be in terms of science, technology, and innovation. And of course, the executive order number 5, which was churned out last year, is essentially to begin to look at research outcomes that are original in Nigeria, that can be laid out in terms of upcoming projects within the country. In other words, such projects must begin to be Nigerian, both in content, in design, and implementation, while yet being globally competitive. So the essence is to ensure that whatever we do, whatever project we undertake to do, there must be a Nigerian content. that is not only Nigerian in nature, but must be globally competitive. So what we want to achieve in this way is to ensure that whatever we want to do, before any other expatriate in court is invited to assume a particular job, particularly under the public sector, then we must satisfy ourselves that no such expert exists within the context of Nigerian professionals. It is only then we can accept probably an outside expatriate. Of course, there are challenges in terms of implementation because it's not yet law, it's an executive order. A lot of institutions try to violate or try to, flout this executive order. Now, so we are trying to see how this executive order can be statutorily enacted so that whoever violates them, can attract some level of, statutory penalties, where necessary. So we must begin to look at that as part of, our effort to instill innovation in whatever we do. Of course, there is this national strategy for competitiveness in raw materials and product development, which has been championed by the federal government, essentially to ensure that we have raw materials, that most of the things we produce in Nigeria or that we import from outside the country, that we can source for the raw materials within the country, then we must begin to access and promote those raw materials in a competitive manner in such a way that it can lead to, our local industries using them, for production and manufacturing of goods and services. Again, we have the usual technology expo that we do virtually every year, which is equally a matchmaking platform as well, to bring research findings from our institutions and also private individuals that have been able to, achieve some outcomes in terms of their research, to see whether they could meet certain individuals who are venture capitalists who can also finance such activities. Again, so let me not bore you with a lot of things we do in the ministry, but at the bottom line is that we have developed a model now within the ministry, which is essentially linking STI to creation of wealth, within the nation. Then we're also using this concept of science diplomacy to ensure that we collaborate, with sister countries that we can leverage on certain advantages. Essentially what we do is we take like 2, 3, 4 countries, come together, agree on a particular pilot project for research. Then we can, for instance, leverage on a country A that has expertise, in terms of researchers. Then we can leverage on country B, for instance, that has a very stable, robust research infrastructure. And then 3, we can leverage on country C, for instance, hypothetically, that has what I call funding capacities. So the essence is to ensure technology exchange. That is the essence of science diplomacy. So we're encouraging that. We see that in the recent effort in the COVID-19, where the science and tech ministries across African countries met to agree on how to approach the pandemic in terms of research, funding, and infrastructure. So I thank you very much. I want to conclude by saying that I want to again commend the organizers for this event, for giving us the opportunity to be part of this interaction on scientific innovation as a pivotal tripod of the STI ecosystem. I believe it's an ongoing conversation, what we do to support our country in terms of innovation. I'll be very willing to listen to the panelists who are very distinguished in their own standing. I hope I'll be able to interact with them. I hope that I'll be able to answer a few questions that will support this initiative. I thank you very much for listening to me, and I truly appreciate your kind attention. Thank you. I muted?
Tope,
Thank you, Honourable.
Yeah. Muted again.
Give me
I want to thank you for the opening, and my first question will be directed at you actually, but we'll hold that for now so we can get the thoughts of other panelists. Let me reintroduce Mazi Ohuabunwa properly. He is not just the president of the Pharmaceutical Society of Nigeria, he is also a past chairman of the Nigeria Economic Summit Group. And I believe he's also the chairman of Nigeria Pharmaceuticals. Mazi, I'm going to ask you to, in 5 minutes, give us your perspective on what you think innovation. We want to start building a consensus on the meaning of innovation.
Well, thank you, Tope, for that additional introduction, because I was going to say whether it's against the rules of this not to disclose that I was chairman of NESG in the past. So I'm glad you took that on. I want to thank the Honourable Minister, Layo and Jala, and all the people in NESG, and my account officer, Onyeche Tifase, who has grown to be a big girl now, and all those great people on this panel. I think this conversation is good and overdue. My only hope and pray, as past chairman of NESG, I've been in MAN, I've been in NEC, I've led all those organizations, and I've been in this advocacy of speaking and speaking and speaking. And you know, sometimes you get a little bit weary because actions don't follow words. Otherwise, what would, if in our industry, for example, in the pharmaceutical industry, that up to today, 60% of over 60% of locally used medicines, in fact, some say 70% are imported. Over 80% of our raw materials, excipients, and including packaging are imported. And some of these raw materials are agri-based, some are petrochemical-based, and some are pure chemicals. I believe that the reason why we haven't done well in the area of innovation, research and development, and commercialization is what I call the enduring import dependency economic philosophy of our country. The suppressed innovation and creativity in the sector, abandonment of backward integration policy introduced in the late 80s, early 90s. No real incentive to make these inputs around the academia and industry. We haven't seen real incentives. And the economic imperative, including lack of long-term funding and market access. And finally, easy access to imports by local manufacturers. I believe that there is a way to go. The way to go is just not speak, but begin to gather people and decide to set timelines and actions that can result in innovation or the employment or integration of research outputs into our production activities. For us in the pharmaceutical area, for example, we will believe that one thing to do is the identification of raw materials that can be substituted with existing local substitutes. Now, there are raw materials that are available, yet they are not being used. And it might require a little bit of negotiation, incentives, and maybe arm twisting for local industry to use them. And I believe that that job is something that the National Institute of Pharmaceutical Research and Development, the Pharmaceutical Manufacturers Group, the Raw Materials Research and Development Center, NAFDAC, under the auspices of the maybe the Ministry of Science and Technology, should mandate the use of these things, like the pharmaceutical grade starch, cellulase, binders, kaolin powder, sugar, and solvents like ethanol. Some of these are still imported, but they exist in our country. The second is planned phasing out of some identified.
I think we lost Mazi there. Comms team, try and resolve at the back end, please. In the meantime, let me call on Mrs. Onyeche Tifase to give us very briefly her perspective on innovation. What does innovation mean to you, Mrs. Tifase?
Thank you so much, Mr. Toogun. First of all, I'd like to welcome and appreciate my fellow panelists. First, Barrister Mohammad Abdullahi, the Honourable Minister of State for the Federal Ministry of Science and Technology, Salihu Bakari, representing TETFund, Mazi Ohuabunwa, President of the Pharmaceutical Society of Nigeria, and also our host, Mr. Jayola, representing the NESG, and of course, also our moderator, Mr. Toogun. So thank you all. I think it's a very exciting topic, and it's one that has come to the fore, especially in these times we're facing with the advent of the COVID-19 pandemic. And one thing I would say the pandemic has done is make us realize, first of all, what we have and what we don't have. And it has created a sense of urgency for us to be more self-sufficient. So this topic directly correlates with the fact that with COVID-19 pandemic, how are you going to source drugs locally? Just as my fellow panelist, Mr. Ohuabunwa has said. How are we going to be able to access healthcare, local healthcare solutions that are adapted for our own conditions? How are we going to even be able to feed ourselves and educate our own citizens? These are all the questions that cross everyone. So as a mother, as an engineer, as a Nigerian most especially, and someone running a business here in Nigeria, I ask myself the same questions that all my fellow panelists will raise. Why can we not innovate in Nigeria? What is blocking us from that? And really happy to hear from the Honourable Minister of State, Barrister Abdullahi, about some of the incentives and initiatives being put together by the government, but there's still a lot to be done. And one of the first things I will say is, tying back to what Mazi Ohuabunwa has said, without raw materials, we can't drive innovation. We have these natural resources. How are we leveraging them? Why are we not leveraging them? What is required to leverage them? It's not just the natural resources, it's also the human resources. Why are we able, do we have I think Nigeria has over 70% of its population below the age of 30. How are we leveraging our youth and our natural resources to be able to drive innovation? And by the way, if we don't do that, as other countries have done, then we are still not self-sufficient and we're still not addressing this topic. So one of the things holding us back is definitely, I would say, first and foremost, a lack of investment in the education space. There's some developments over the past years, but we need to do much more of that. And it's not just investing, but finding the right partnerships between university and private sector, incentivizing, having policies that incentivize private sector to be able to collaborate with universities. We as Siemens are investing, we're partnering with universities for various initiatives, funding their labs, providing training. We have an academy in Nigeria, here in Lagos State here, providing training to young Nigerians. We're also sponsoring hackathons, but there's no structure in place. There's no incentive to do this. And most organizations doing this are doing this on their own cognizance. There's no reward for doing it in essence. So how do we build structures around enabling or encouraging private sector to collaborate with academia and to do this sustainably? In countries like Germany, where they have policies, the Vocational Training Act of 1969 in Germany encouraged collaborations between private sector and training of youth, such that there was rewards and certification. In fact, it became mandatory for companies to train youth. And you have many people now in a company like Siemens who are at the very top, who came in as trainees from the age of 16, 17, 18. They've been working with Siemens for decades. And that is how we encourage, we start to innovate by, first of all, feeding these young minds with exposure to technology, practical and theoretical sciences. The second thing is also, how do we start to create a structure around encouraging a character building? I think we've seen in instances where many organizations, especially small and medium enterprises, are investing in the youth, but we're not, the mindset and values have to change. And this is something that is often left out in the topic of innovation. Part of the vocational training construct that Germany delivered was about changing people's mindsets, about thinking, how do we solve our own problems? So first of all, we must ensure that the youth of today have the right mindset about, first of all, how am I a value creator? How do I use my own products and not necessarily something that has been imported? How do I take pride in what my country is doing? And how do I contribute to national building? These things are where the government and private sector must also collaborate to ensure that there's awareness. In some countries, you can call it brainwashing, but it's done proactively. The youth have a strong sense of identity with the nation, and they understand that there are tools to ensure the nation achieves economic growth. So there are structures in place for them to access training, development opportunities, but they also see that as a personal responsibility. And how do we change mindsets towards an affinity for imported products, towards utilizing and placing local products as a priority? I believe that what the Ministry of Science and Technology is doing is the first, building some frameworks and first steps. It's great to see that, but I think we need to ensure that the pace of development, the pace of collaboration, the pace of investment in education, in infrastructure, and in incentivizing private sector to collaborate with academia and government has to be much more hastened. The last one I would like to highlight, the last topic I think is very critical, is infrastructure. I know there's often discussions about access to finance. I think access to finance is something we are resolving slowly but surely. But when it comes to infrastructure, without adequate infrastructure, we cannot in any way accelerate innovation as a driver for economic growth. We need to have proper transportation infrastructure. Electrification is a very key topic, and I'm happy to say Siemens is collaborating with the government in resolving our immediate and future needs around electricity. But also we must ensure there's access to proper healthcare infrastructure, and most importantly, education. Our schools need to be upgraded, expanded. We need modern labs. We need modern equipment. We need also modern curricula for teachers, lecturers in every facet of the education institutions. From primary all the way to tertiary education, we need to start to drive a more modern and advanced methodology of training and content of training. So those are just a few words that I want to start with. I'm sure a lot my panelists will touch on them as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Tifase. We're actually going to still come back to talk some more about infrastructure, and we will take a quick trip to Egypt in the process when we come back. I'm glad Mazi Ohuabunwa is now back online. Please, can you conclude your opening statement, sir?
Please unmute yourself, sir.
Thank you. I say I'm sorry. This is what happens in the new normal as we keep learning and use this equipment. I am planning that. I just say that there are things we must do. And one of the things I'm saying is we should not leave it at discretion, especially in my industry, in pharmaceutical area, in production and manufacturing. We should not leave the utilization of local material just at the discretion of manufacturers, which I'm one. I think there must be some effort, just as Onyeche was saying right now, on providing physical incentives for deletion by pharma companies. It's like a percentage of the savings in Forex refunded to the company through tax amortization or through import duty rebates. I think we need to revamp the abandoned National Petrochemical Master Plan to produce the petrochemical-based starting elements. We had a petrochemical master plan that was developed in the 80s, but we abandoned it at some point. And therefore, those things need to come back. And the partnership between academia and industry has to be supported. I remember as CEO of NEMEC, when I wanted to transmute from Pfizer to NEMEC, I wanted to do a R&D for our own lines because we didn't want to continue with the franchise we were holding for Pfizer. It was such an expensive thing, and we have to use short-term money to invest in long-term R&D to produce our own brands. Some of those brands came from collaboration between us and the University of Port Harcourt, where we had some researchers who had done some work. Funding is important, and that's why I'm happy with what the new CBN effort at helping to provide funding for research and development for industry. So I think that is where we need to go, provide funding, provide incentives, as has been remarked. We need to have a wholesale adoption of application of 21st century research tools driven by technology and infrastructure, as been said. Enforcement of intellectual property rights, change of our national orientation from external dependency to self-dependency. Also, Onyeche made reference to it. That's our thinking as a country and as a people. And take strong leadership in the AFCTA to create market access for local R&D and ensure adequate return on the investment for sustainability. Because we wanted to do R&D and innovation, but you also have the market to justify the expenditure. So in summary, what I'm saying is that right now, we need to do something more practical. That is a meeting between academia, industry, and government, and maybe with the help of funders, to decide what can be done now, what can be done tomorrow, what do we need to do them, who should be incentivized, who does what. I think if we don't get to that level, we can be speaking about this thing for another 20 years, and government will give us a long list of the things, of the institutions they have set up. So I think we need to be more practically driven in this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mazi Ohuabunwa. I should reiterate at this stage, because this has come out quite clearly, that the NESG, in partnership with the National Universities Commission and the Tertiary Education Trust Fund, have set up a permanent platform to facilitate these conversations and moderate interactions. It is called the Nigeria Triple Helix Roundtable. And the purpose of the Triple Helix Roundtable is to look at practical solutions around fostering innovation through university academia collaboration, by looking at the policy outlines and by continuously moderating these interactions and setting timelines. This series of innovation dialogues is an initiative of this platform, the Nigeria Triple Helix Roundtable. And everything you've said are the things that we are taking forward. So let me call Dr. Bakari. Mazi said some things that I want Dr. Bakari to respond to in his opening statement. So I was quite interested in hearing about the raw materials that we're still importing. 80%, 70% of drugs are still coming in. And I have a question for you, Mazi, on that later on. But yesterday, TETFund announced that the president approved a 7.5 billion naira vote fund research under the NRF, that's the National Research Fund at TETFund. Yes. We know that last year was about 4 billion naira. It's growing, and they're funding, they're giving grants to researchers in universities. Dr. Bakari, when we hear that in transforming from Pfizer to NEMEC, that Mazi had to spend a lot of money on R&D. We then want to find out, so what is the focus? Where are we directing the research grants that TETFund is giving to universities?
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Tope, for this opportunity. And let me also join my senior panel members. Somebody's call has been disturbed. Yeah. So I would like to thank you most sincerely for this opportunity. The research, yesterday, it was announced, yes, that the sum of 7.5 billion Naira research grants has been approved by Mr. President under the National Research Fund of TETFund. This 7.5 billion is in addition to the already 5 billion Naira research grants approved in 2019 for applied research. Actually, under the 2019 research grants, 128 grantees have been awarded to carry out various applied problem-solving research for Nigeria. And largely, the grantees are from public universities, but also from some polytechnics and colleges of education, as well as some private universities have also been collaborating with the public universities to access this research grant. Right now, 128 research grantees have been carrying out various forms of research within Nigeria, and the research focuses on three main areas. Number one,
we can't hear you again.
the most important, sorry, it's an interruption.
Okay. Go on.
Hello?
Hello, we can hear you now.
So following the successful utilization of the 2019 grants, the Executive Secretary of TETFund recommended through the board, and the minister recommended for the increase of research grants by 50%. And this has been graciously approved by Mr. President. Right now, a call for concept notes for accessing of this 7.5 billion Naira has been placed, and we've started receiving responses from universities, from polytechnics, from colleges of education, as well as from.
When you were speaking and we lost you, you were about to mention the three main areas that this year's research grants are going to focus on. Can you please take us through those three areas?
Thank you. Its focuses about 2/3 of this money will focus on science, technology, engineering, and innovation. And then humanities and social sciences, and then cross-cutting. Cross-cutting, virtually, these are the main themes, but there are also some sub-themes. Under cross-cutting, for example, the issues of energy, issues surrounding environment, issues that have to do with security, food security, national security, national integration. All those areas are covered under cross-cutting. Then humanities and social sciences as well, because as we all know that society is interrelated, and you cannot just focus on science at the expense of the other segments of social sciences that make up even the science, the philosophy of science, if you like. So we focus on engineering, we focus on medical research, with virtually every aspect of our national research grant. And as I said, the research grant is focusing on problem solving, it's applied research. What are we doing? Not just carrying out research for research's sake, but we want to solve Nigeria's technological, economic, social problems through using these research grants. And of course, we emphasize that the essence, because you asked a question about innovation, our own thinking is this: ultimately, innovation is a complement of research. Innovation comes out of the various research that is carried out, the result leads to innovation. And this innovation, we hope that the industries will uptake the research outcomes and make them into commercial products, just like the Honourable Minister of State was talking about. Because at the end of the day, if you just carry out research and shelve it or publish it without really using the outcome of research to solve our problems, we are just carrying out research for academic sake. Well, there's nothing wrong with carrying out research for academic, but there's something really fundamentally wrong if we cannot use research to drive innovation. So eventually we believe in TETFund that research is basic to technology generation, it's very basic to job creation, it's basic to poverty alleviation and to national development. I would like to use our own resources to collaborate, especially the issue of industry, academia, and government relationship. We are the government, we provide resources on behalf of government. We expect the industry, we expect the academia to carry out cutting-edge research that will be trusted by the industry, so that industry can uptake the outcome of those research and, which will lead eventually to commercialization, patenting, innovation, and ultimately national development. This is the focus of our intervention.
Thank you, Dr. Bakari. Mazi Ohuabunwa, I want to ask the Honourable Minister 2 questions now, but I would like you after that to respond to what Bakari has just said. Because if I remember in your statements, there were issues around R&D, there are issues around backward integration that requires R&D. So now we hear that there is 7.5 billion naira for research grant that you will respond to in terms of what you want to happen within your state. Minister, let me pull together what Mrs. Ohuabunwa and Mrs. Tifase have said. In terms of, yes, there is the policy framework, but it does not appear as if it is percolating through in implementation. That's why Mrs. Tifase was talking about we need a structure. We need something to incentivize industry so that we can take this process forward more effectively. Mazi also was quite clear in terms of why are we still importing 80% of raw materials? Why are we importing 60% of drugs when we have some of these same resources locally? And that's within the purview and the mandate of what the ministry may have been pushing. The question I want to ask you, arising from that, is something around our science, technology, and innovation policy making. Yes, we have the 2012 STI policy. We have the 2017 STI roadmap and the 2018 Executive Order number 5. We have those ones, we've read them. I also want to draw your attention to Science, Technology, and Innovation Strategy for Africa, TISA 2024, that has been referenced in some of the documents by the ministry. And one particular place there says that STI policy making in Africa, that there is isolation from other policy agencies, that there are weak links to private sector, to education and the research sectors. When you hear what Mazi Ohuabunwa and Mrs. Tifase have just said, what's your take on that observation in TISA 2024 about the quality of our STI policy making in Africa, and what will the ministry do to ensure that these issues they've mentioned are taken into consideration and we take practical steps to resolve them?
Okay, thank you very much. I think from my understanding, my practical understanding of the issues, there is ordinarily should be a multi-sectoral approach, to this kind of challenges. Yes, I agree. There are a lot of policies that have been churned out, from the perspective, of the ministry, but it also behoves on the practitioners, to begin to look at the policies and see within the framework of the policies how they can truly, within the expectations of the profession, see how they can practicalize these policies. Now, it is one thing to bring out the policy, and a different ballgame again to implement without the cooperation, for instance, the professionals. I was privileged to, I think in December, I was privileged to address the Nigerian Society of Engineers conference in Kano last year. I threw a challenge to them, but I told them that the engineering professionals must begin to look at
we're having challenges with the Honourable Minister's connection.
at the practice of to partner with before you can practice in Nigeria. And even at that, you must go to some trainings within Nigerian law school before you can be allowed a license to practice in Nigeria. So I challenge engineers that look, all sorts of engineers come from Lebanon, come from Ghana, they just come into Nigeria and begin to take over your practice. So it encourages an abuse of our policies. It does not encourage government, to begin to monitor its own policy, because there's a collaboration within the system, within the Nigerian professionals. If I remember very well, you mentioned something about incentivizing R&D.
Yes.
Well, like the doctor has spoken, the representative of Professor Bogoro has spoken, there are a number of incentives. Again, it could be seen just from the perspective of policy making or public service regulations. But we have been able to provide, for instance, you just mentioned about 7 billion naira from TETFund. That is an incentive, for Nigerian professionals, for Nigerian researchers to take advantage of and begin to see how they can utilize it, to advance future innovations. Of course, we have the National Research and Innovation Fund, which is in the offing at the moment. Because of the challenge we had in terms of the process of legislation, and then the fact that some areas appear to be impracticable, the NRIC bill, if I recall, has been passed by the National Assembly, but has not been assented to by the President, due mainly because of the issues that are inherent within the bill itself, and that appear to be irreconcilable between the executive and the legislature. But the entire essence of that bill is to ensure that incentives are provided, for researchers. Government, through the public sector, focuses on developing raw materials that Nigeria to support pharmaceutical industry research and manufacture of drugs, to support our biochemical industries. So there has been a major focus, to be honest with you, in terms of a push towards ensuring that these things are practicalized, these policies are given the practical effect in Nigeria. However, like I said, it behoves on the professionals. And like Mr. Tifase said, this tendency for foreign goods, this tendency for foreign products, we must also develop a policy of ethical reorientation of particularly ourselves, like elders, and of course the youths, to begin to look in-house, to begin to look homewards for whatever we produce. That is how China started. That is how Korea started. You and me knew that in those days, in the early 80s, you only heard of Nokia in Sweden. Nobody heard of Samsung. But today, Samsung is a household name, even in Africa. It is because they've been able to look homeward and, through reverse engineering, begin to create, what they think they can do in terms of manufacturing and see where they are today. So we must, like he said, we must look at, reverse engineering, which we adopted right now in NASENI, to begin to look at examine products, examine items, and begin to see whether we can replicate it home within the country here. So I agree to a large extent to all of them, to all the speakers, that we must be practical. We must, go beyond policy making. We must, but however, the professionals must be supportive, must look at these policies and begin to see how they can also, practicalize it going forward.
Honourable Minister, I said I have 2 questions for you. So the follow-up question.
Yes.
Also in the area of the policy, and it's now a double-barrel question, so to say. So arising from the policy, and after we review all the policy instruments of the ministry, I think it's one of the things that may be causing confusion for people like Mazi, Ohuabunwa, and Mrs. Tifase is, can we really put our finger on what Nigeria's innovation strategy, what Nigeria's innovation agenda is? For instance, which sectors are we prioritizing in our R&D? Are we going into everything, everywhere, or we are saying in these 3 or 4, 5 years, we're doing these 3, 4 sectors? That also has an impact on what we're going to ask TETFund later about. So when you say you are doing STEM in the research, which sectors are you focusing on? Then I'm glad you referenced the bill and the council on research and innovation, Honourable Minister.
Yes.
You want the professionals to come on board. So this double-barrel question of mine is, so what's our innovation strategy? Which sectors are we focusing on? Second is, you mentioned NASENI. Are we focused again on new R&D projects, or are we going to focus on technology adoption, which is what reverse engineering NASENI is doing, or we're doing everything all together? Those are 2. The third thing, and this is about the council, is that doesn't it appear lopsided that the membership of the council, there are only 3 private sector representatives and about 15 to 18 ministers of government? Can you quickly touch on those 3 things, sir?
Okay, let me start from behind, from the last question. Between me and you, I quite agree with you that the structure, and content, of the council on innovation appear to be tilted towards, the public sector much more than the private sector. Now, if we are trying to develop policies and allow the private sector to drive it, then they must be seen to be a co-partner, an equal partner rather, in the committee. So I quite agree with you, and a number of people have raised issues with that, and I think part of the issues being addressed is this lopsided nature of the membership between the public sector and the private sector. And I hope that, given every assurances that we've gotten, that can be addressed in the subsequent bill that's been addressed by the Attorney General. Now, if I get the second question rightly, I hope I've not confused it. You mentioned about our strategy in terms of innovation and area of focus. Well, our strategy is to see that Nigeria, in virtually every field, is innovative in such a manner that it brings value to the life of the common man. It brings value to the country in a manner that it creates industrialization and a manufacturing process that will bring up a value chain of activities that will employ a lot of people and then provide, some level of upgrade in terms of their pattern of livelihood. And the area of focus actually is space technology, engineering infrastructure, leather, natural medicine, of course, chemical technology, and technology management. So all this, we are using some vehicles, which are the 17 agencies within the ministry, to drive these policies. And so to a large extent, yes, Our innovation policy is targeted at uplifting the life of the common man, and then leveraging on technology to industrialize the country and to provide employment, and to ensure that we are competitive, with other countries, and then see whether we can leverage on that as well, and begin to see whether we can export to even our South African countries. So like I said, the focus is on manufacturing, biotech, space science, leather tech, chemical tech, and in fact, even artificial intelligence and robotics, because we cannot be behind other countries. There are far lesser countries than us that are into AI. So we must begin to also leverage on that as well and move on. I can't remember your first question. If I do, I should be able to.
Both of them, sir. My first was on which sectors are we concentrating on? The second was on are we looking at new technologies that we would develop, or we're looking primarily at reverse engineering, that's technology adoption as a way of quickly getting started. But you've touched on both of them in your answer. Thank you very much, sir. So Mazi, you've heard from TETFund, you've heard from the Honourable Minister of State for Science and Technology. How do those responses get to address this issue of 80% of active pharmaceutical ingredients still being imported? What can you plug into as a sector?
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yes,
thank you very much, Tope. And I want to thank the Honourable Minister for laboring to be very clear on this matter, because I can see him trying to be as open and as fair as he can. It's not his fault. He just came to government. We have had governments before he came. The problem is that our country hasn't come to the point where we understand how to prioritize things and how to understand how the total economy operates. There's always this bifocal looking at an economy. We should look at the economy on a broad base and know that the greater part of the economy is in the private sector. The large 90% of GDP, if not, is produced by the private sector. But the small 10-2% that is in government sometimes have a myopic view. Now, when we talk about prioritization, which we asked, what is the priority? Even the 7.5 billion, the 5 billion, what is the priority? A country at each given time decides what its priority is. I give an example. Everybody's talking about healthcare epidemic, pandemic, and the fragile health systems we have and all that. I would have thought that this year, the 7.5 billion this year should be focused on healthcare research, not on everything. Because this is what government does. I've proposed it. Government have limited facility, limited funding. It should not propose to do everything. If I were in government, I would take one thing a year. This year I'm going to build roads. You people should wait for water or whatever else. The next year we're going to build schools. Then we first invest on schools. By doing little of things with little money, which this 75 billion, thank God, is TETFund, and I pray that it get released, or the 5 billion of the money may not be released after being budgeted, and we keep repeating the same thing over the same year. Let's learn to prioritize. Government decide this is the year, this is what we want, and this is what we want to invest this money. And having said so, the next thing is to say who decides who gets what. I think on the table where this discussion is being made, the industries that need this innovation should be on the table. So that when we're with the academia, when we're with the government people, say, this is what we want. As I'm speaking now, I'm looking for a pharmaceutical grade starch, ordinary starch, pharmaceutical grade. We don't have it. So government says, is that what you want? We say yes. And this is what the whole industry needs. They put some investment on it and then make us pharmaceutical grade in 1 or 2 years. Next year, we'll take another one. So I need a prioritization, as Tope you well pointed out. 2, we need the people that need this research, who use them, to be on the table, not 15 people from the public sector and 3 people from private sector. Thirdly, is accountability. How do we measure progress? How do we measure outcome? We released 5 billion last year. I don't know what they released the year before. What are the outcomes? What has come out of this? We give another loan, we give another intervention. What have we done with the one we did? What is the usable outcome? There's good to be done in money, spend money, effort, but we measure results. What is the result? That has to be made and communicated to the ecosystem so that we know we invested so much money, we use them for so and so, this is what it has come out with. So Nigeria can say the 5 billion, 7.5 billion has saved us this. We'll no longer import this thing, we'll no longer buy this thing, we can now use them locally, and government and the private sector will advertise it and it will move around. My final point on this is the issue of incentives. You know, behavior does not change until there's either incentive. Incentive can be positive or negative. Punishment can be incentive or negative incentive. This country can only change if there is an incentive, if the whole basically is governed by an incentive scheme. And so that there will be 2 points. First is government funding, 7.5 billion, so much billion. That is wonderful. It is good. Government is spending this money. But the private sector also has capacity to do research. As I told you, we did in NIMET and Pfizer. We have capacity. And what we need is incentive. For example, we're asking Dangote to build a road for us. After he had built this road, would he take it on tax deduction for a number of years? That is what the kind of incentive that the private sector will also need. Nobody is doing this. We need to focus on it. How do we incentivize the private sector to even invest their own money if they have, or get money as they're getting from low priced fund, which is what is good. They're getting from CBN and such other organization, and invest and get some incentive. So we need to work on those two schemes. Government investment, what do we invest on? Who is there involved in it? What's the accountability? And how do we incentivize the private sector itself to do investment and to adopt any research? Because today, as I used to joke with my manufacturers, and they think I'm kidding them. I said, if you left to manufacturers in Nigeria, they will import water. If you gave them freedom, they will tell you the water in China is better than the water in Nigeria. I am one, and I'm speaking the issue. So there must be an incentive or a punishment for refusing to take Nigerian water, or an incentive to use Nigerian water. That is and that is government's job. I, as a private sector person, either an NESG, man, or NECA, whatever we have been or where we are, we cannot enforce it. That's the work of government. So coordination is required. Today, Ministry of Industry is doing something. Ministry of Science and Technology is doing something. Ministry of Health is doing something. All in research, or Ministry of Education is doing. So we need to have a coordination. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. I'm going to go to Mrs. Tifase now, but let me ask Dr. Gere in the meantime to prepare to address some of the issues raised by Mazi Ohuabunwa. So there are two things that came out. First, if I hear Mazi correctly, is that we need to have a serious conversation about research impact assessment. How do we assess the impact? It's not enough to simply say we've allocated X amount of money to something. Then I also heard him say that 90% of innovation, 70, 80, 90% of innovation occurs in the private sector. So if we take from the theme that we really can't be talking about innovation when there is this lopsided representation in the agenda. So how involved was the private sector in the selection of the priority areas that TETFund was focusing on? The NRF people engage with industry across board to then say these are the top 3 areas we are going to select. So please prepare to address issues around how you arrived at the choices and how we can then take the outcome to market in terms of not just spending the money, but ensuring that we measure success by the impact that we get. I will come to you later. Mrs. Tifase, let's take a quick trip to Egypt, like I said. Infrastructure is critical. And one of the reasons why innovation doesn't seem to work in developing economies is there is a lack of complementarities. So we can be spending money on research from the government side, But the associated engagement, as we've had with the private sector, is not occurring. And then the research output gets stuck at one particular stage. But one big part of the complementarity why manufacturers will be complaining, research may not go anywhere, and people prefer to import everything and anything that they can and simply pull them together, is that infrastructure is also a crucial part to enable research and innovation to occur. You are driving the revamp of the electricity sector in Nigeria. Mm-hmm. And if we have electricity, we know that manufacturing will occur smoothly and cheaply. We know we can be competitive. I would like you to give us very quickly a view on that program, the electricity that you are driving, so that other stakeholders can know how and where to key into it. That's one. And we took a look at your electricity plan, and there's a section that speaks to capacity development there, the need for trained engineers. Let me refer to my notes. The need for trained engineers, better education to industry link, and that this roadmap will result in high demand for a skilled workforce. When we look at workforce in Nigeria, workforce development occurs between the Ministry of Labor and the Ministry of Education. Are they involved, or have you consulted with them in this process of leveraging this program that you are doing to build skilled and competent workforce, which, as part of what the minister also referred to in Executive Order number 5, we want to have a skilled base of Nigerians who can do things, so we don't always rely on foreigners. And thirdly, this is now my trick question for you. There is the Egypt-Germany Technical Academy, which costs 22 million euro. Why is, that was Siemens in Egypt. Why is Siemens not doing something on that scale in Nigeria? My 3-in-1 question for you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Togo. And since you said it's 3-in-1 questions, I'll answer with one answer and combine them. Thank you. First of all, I want to, create context around why we're having this conversation. We don't have time. We're talking about structures for collaborating with ministries, or why we're not doing this, or what we do not have time. At the same time, Nigeria is facing the challenges out of COVID, and COVID is now revealing. Let's say it's opened. It's opened all our issues to the glaring issues to the world. Is other countries are becoming more protectionist, more nationalistic. There's discrimination. There are barriers, increasing barriers to trade and doing business worldwide. And other countries that are trying to progressively accelerate their own economic standing in the world. And at the same time, that means that they have to leverage or overtake other nations, and in essence, push them to the back of the pack. So we don't have time right now, I think, but I think it's important to know that for all those listening in on this conversation, that there is hope. We have a lot going for us. Nigeria is a country with over 70% of people below the age of 30. Most on the world average is 50%. So we have a bulging youth population that can really add value to this country, but what are we doing with them? Secondly, investment in education is far below par. The world average we're about 171 out of 197 ranked with regards to investment in education. For Global Innovation Index, we are 114 out of 129. We're almost at the bottom of the pack. And what we're saying, and I love what Mazi Ohuabunwa said, what we just need to do is to get things right. We need to build standards, and we need to build standardization. The two I'm saying differently: standards about what we use, how we build things, how we educate our youth, and then we need to ensure there's standardization. How do we access incentives? How are companies penalized or incentivized? But how then also are we as private sector able to collaborate with government? It's wonderful to hear about the 7.5 billion research fund under the NIRS that the Honourable Minister of State has highlighted. But how is this accessed? How is it made known? And I think before I go into the infrastructure story, one critical measure we must focus on in response to leveraging our youth, leveraging private sector contribution in Nigeria. Nigeria is #1 GDP in Africa. And as Mazi Ohuabunwa said, 90% of GDP is always private sector enabled. That means we have a massive opportunity to incentivize private sector to change the story around innovation as a driver for economic growth. But the first priority for me is education. And I heard Mr. Bakari say that research drives innovation, but what drives research? What drives research? And that is where, let's go back to the beginning. It starts with education. And we've highlighted that, yes, there are funds, there are initiatives, but how targeted and strategic are they? The first thing is that I'll give examples for what is going on within Siemens. Siemens is partnering with over 20 universities globally. Siemens is building faculties of science and technology. The Faculty of Technology in the University of Lincoln and other universities worldwide built by Siemens. As a sponsorship, Siemens is sponsoring research grants on specific topics that are driving innovation around future technologies. Siemens is sponsoring PhD programs for youth. Siemens is sitting on many engineering institutes worldwide. Why can't we have those sorts of benefits? And here I hear you speak about the Egypt Technical Academy. Why can't we have that here? It's about, and why was it possible for Siemens to start to speak about the electrification sector? It's because organizations like ours are constantly lobbying the government on their abilities to be able to change the game around different sectors of the economy. But it's such a long-winded and extensive process. And sometimes you hit a rock, or you hit a hard, or you see a door shut in your face because it's impossible to overcome certain barriers. I think we were just able to continuously, with perseverance and effort, speak to all stakeholders in the sector and convince them about the need, the urgency to have an integrated and comprehensive solution to resolving the Nigeria's power sector. And that is going to be a game changer, because with electricity, as you said, manufacturing can thrive. And then as manufacturing thrives, the economy grows, but also innovation is then accelerated. Regarding collaboration with the government on education, we have tied our training and development proposals to the program we have at hand. The idea is to feed in to ensure that there's available capacity in country to be able to build those facilities that will be those electrification infrastructure across generation, transmission, and distribution. It's not about importing skills like we see today. It's about ensuring that there's a pool of locally trained individuals who are able to contribute to the story around the Presidential Power Initiative. And that's the first and foremost priority. As time goes on, the electrification, those skills will unlock other opportunities, and we're happy to also train in youth on that. We also have an industrial training program that is focused on digitalization, attached to this same electrification initiative, the Presidential Power Initiative, that's also training base skills for industrialization around digitalization, around artificial intelligence, also around the Internet of Things. So we're not just limiting it to training on energy, power generation, transmission, and distribution technologies, but also on industrial technologies and digital, especially for the enhancement of digital skills. But this is just a taste of what one organization like ours can do. We're talking about a program here to resolve the electrification gaps. We've all seen evidence of the absence of infrastructure here on this call today. We've had communication issues. We've had power issues. I'm sure some of us are running our generators right now. That, and first and foremost, is our priority. We must resolve that. And enabling 25 gigawatts of electricity in the medium to long term in Nigeria, I think will unlock a lot more investment and growth. Coming back to the collaboration with Ministry of Education and Ministry of Labor, we have approached the Ministry of Education. We have presented proposals in the past for collaboration. Just to say, it's something we're open to. I'm very proud of the fact that the NESG is driving the Nigeria Triple Helix Roundtable. It creates conversation, and that we already have a structure for collaboration with the Nigerian Universities Commission as well. So those structures just need to be enhanced. They need to be broadened. They need to be opened up and made accessible to organizations like ours. I can tell you, I'm also the president of the Nigerian German Chamber of Commerce. There are many organizations that are desperate to get involved in building stronger initiatives around education and investing in academia.
It's interesting you said that, because if you listen to people in academia, they say the private sector people are not coming. And you say private sector people are desperate to get involved. So we have this platform, like right, and it is indeed open and available to Siemens and every like the Egypt German Technical Center, and to also have you construct a few faculties of engineering in Nigeria. You mentioned Lincoln, so we'll hold you to that. This session is being recorded, so we'll have another conversation offline.
Before I hand over, we also hand it over to the government to do what Dr. Ohuabunwa said. Create avenues, channels for us to be able to, because for every investment dollar invested, there must be a return. That is why private sector, that's how private sector thrives. Otherwise, private sector in itself is also disabled and is not able to grow. And so investment must come with a return, and it's making that clear. What are the returns? What are the incentives? And also, what are the channels for participation? Those are not often clear to many of these organizations that can invest.
If you start your video. Have you seen it? Somewhere saying, please start your video.
Thank you, Mr. Toogun. I'm not sure if you could hear me.
I'm going to take it to frame the next question for the Honourable. And I will be asking him specific questions around how we can prioritize, how to focus on
start my video.
Start your video. How we can incentivize some more to unlock additional resources. While the minister is reflecting on that, let me call on Dr. Gire to now answer the question I had earlier about the process of the involvement of the private sector, which is 90% of the GDP, in arriving at the areas where TETFund decided to spend the research money on, and also how we can then ensure that these things make it to the market and use that to measure the impact instead of stopping at the level of the quantum of. Dr. Gire, can you hear me?
It's like you are breaking, sir, but I can hear you now.
Oh, yeah, now. Can you hear me clearly?
Yeah, I can hear you. Hello?
Hello, Dr. Gire. Okay.
Can you hear me?
So I said, are you ready to answer the question?
Yes, thank you.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you very much. First and foremost, let me quickly say that TETFund is very much sensitive to what is going on, especially with the COVID-19 pandemic. And that I listened to Mazi very attentively. And I would like to say that apart from the national research grant of the 7.5 billion naira we're talking about, TETFund has actually allocated special grants for addressing specific COVID-19 related problems. And just yesterday, the executive secretary has signed 5 research grants and has approved 5 research grants that is specifically focusing on COVID-19 pandemic issue. 5 from 5, and out of about 9, we received 9 special research grants proposals. They went through the process of selection and assessment, and 5 so far have been granted over 200 million just yesterday. So this is just one aspect And I also want to say quickly that the federal government through TETFund has approved. Yes.
Dr.
Yes.
The question Mazi asked, let's reference, I said the question Mazi Ohuabunwa asked, if we reference the COVID-19 grants,
yes,
the entire process that the research proposals were taken through, was there any private sector involvement in arriving at the 5 proposals to be funded? Because after the research is completed and the development is there, it will still have to be commercialized. And that will be the function of the private sector. So were they involved in looking at which one of those propositions can actually be commercialized?
Absolutely.
Before TETFund? Yes, we can hear you, go.
Yes, I know, but he said many things. That's why I wanted to put certain information.
Okay.
Hello? Yes, I'm coming back. I'm arriving there, but I just said there was a need to actually contextualize it, to let him know, or let everybody knows that one, apart from the NRF grant, we also have special grant that is actually focusing on addressing the pandemic. Secondly, the federal government through TETFund has also approved the establishment of 6 medical simulation and clinical skills training centers in 6 colleges of medicine, as well as establishment of molecular diagnostic laboratories in 12 colleges of medicine. We're spending 12 billion naira on that. And this process has already commenced. So in other words, I'm trying to say that TETFund is very mindful of the goings on and the need to respond positively to the problem of COVID-19 because we are part of it. So this is just part of it. Now, coming back to the issue of how we arrived at the thematic areas. TETFund has been implementing the NRF since 2011. And just in 2019, after the 2019 award, there was a wider stakeholder meeting to actually review the areas of a research grant. And this included the academia, the industry, and government to look into where we have been investing, what has been the impact of this research thus far. Has it made any impact or any desirable impact? In other words, is the money we are investing really leading to our envisaged goal? And as a result of that meeting, we came up with this expanded theme. Actually, it's now much more expanded. And we thought that this will address, as I said, science, engineering, and technology. And under even the science, engineering, technology, and innovation, there are 11 thematic areas. It used to be only 3 thematic areas. Now it's expanded to 3, ranging from agriculture to health, transport, power and energy, IT, computing, space, energy, science and technology, geosciences, science and engineering, water and sanitation. And of course, we also looked into the SDGs. What are because Nigeria is committed to SDGs. And we looked at how we could use research to actually achieve SDGs. This is one part of it. Another aspect of trying to collaborate, especially with the industry, is that the TETFund is coming up with, in fact, it has constituted, but for the COVID-19, it have inaugurated the R&D Standing Committee, which has not less than 40% of its membership derived from the private sector, from the industry. Manufacturers Association of Nigeria, the Dangote, Seplat, NESG, all those are actually members of the R&D Standing Committee. And the ultimate aim of this R&D Standing Committee is to see how we could eventually come up with R&D Foundation for Nigeria. And TETFund is actually going to provide the funding for the R&D Standing Committee to do its work, maybe within a period of 1 or 2 years, so that we come up with a more comprehensive plan that could eventually transform Nigeria into a knowledge-based economy, into an innovation hub. This is one. This is second aspect. The third aspect is this. We see universities as hubs, eventually as centers where they become innovation hubs. If you go to Israel, Israel is an innovation hub. The entire Israel university system is an innovation hub. They do not shy away from investing in innovation, and in fact, they embrace failure. One major problem we understand, especially with the industry in Nigeria, is because they are partly money-making venture, it's difficult to be investing money in innovation that they are not sure of. Government has to come in to provide that. Government must not shy away from investing in innovation and from taking major risks. I've seen a situation, one case in Israel, where government invested $1 million, and though it was a risk they took, but from that $1 million, government in 1 year got a tax from the outcome of this investment, tax of over $1 billion. We are moving, so we feel that TETFund should not shy away from investing in these universities so that they become innovation hubs, so that the money we use there may be used as incubation, universities become incubation centers, whereby a lot of innovative, innovation will come up, and from there, technology, development, economic prosperity ensures. That will take a lot of time. I took time. I was going through. Sorry, Tope. Just last this thing. I was going through one university in US, the MIT. Stanford. Stanford University has, through innovation, came up with Google, www, HP. In fact, if you pull the inventions of Stanford University alone, is an equivalent to 10th largest economy in the world. So we are not saying that our Nigerian universities will be exactly as Stanford or MIT or Harvard, but we have to start from somewhere. Our universities have to become innovation hubs, and that's where we are heading to. Through the coming of, it has always been that universities are just there providing teaching and then doing research for research sake, and there was little or no effort to collaborate with the industry. TETFund is now providing this gap. It's trying to close that gap by this R&D standing committee, and through the industry, the NUC and TETFund coming together. We hope in the final analysis that this issue of mistrust, if you like, between the industry and the universities or academia, we will be able to address that issue of mistrust. The industries will tell you that the kind of products we are producing in universities does not meet or does not fit.
Thank you, Dr. Gire. Yes, the reason people say that the product is not what they are looking for is probably the same thing that was the basis for the question, that were they involved from the outset in looking at what the focus should be. But the takeaway for you from Mazi Ohuabunwa, because I know that you said you had a session and you've referenced that here to say you expanded the scope. Whereas industry is saying that with the limited funds available, instead of expanding the scope, maybe what TETFund should do is to limit its focus to a few critical areas and apply the funding until we can see results and impact in those areas. So that's a takeaway to take back to TETFund and have a conversation with. Honourable Minister, thank you very much. I now come back to you, sir. I'm bringing two things said by Mrs. Tifase and Mazi Ohuabunwa. First is the issue of the need for coordination, and that leads to what Mrs. Tifase said. So the Ministry of Science and Technology is doing some things in R&D, Ministry of Industry, other ministries are doing things. What is the architecture like? Where is the overarching coordination coming from? This dovetails into, when we look at the 2018 executive order, it does not specify a few areas. it covers a very broad range of things to invest on. And we wonder where the resources to do all that investment will come from. From Mrs. Tifase, I hear the need for incentivizing private sector players to put their money in R&D. All the things that Siemens is doing in other places, let us hold them to also do the same thing here. So some of these things are not within the purview of the ministry, such as getting a tax rebate or a tax relief, and such as getting tariff reduction. But the ministry being the vanguard for promoting science and technology, how can the ministry coordinate all of this and engage with the relevant ministries to secure the kind of incentives, such as tax rebates and the rest? Or is there a plan for that so that we can unlock more resources from the private sector? Honourable Minister, sir. Can you hear me, sir? You have to.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, I said I want to make a slight correction to what of the view of Mr. Mazi Ohuabunwa, where he seems to posit that the 7 billion naira kept for TETFund, for research funds that was increased upon us at yesterday, didn't focus on the COVID-19 pandemic research efforts. What I want him to understand is that there is a specific fund under the CBN which basically target research on COVID-19. The essence is to ensure that TETFund did not deviate from the original mandate, so that it doesn't get distracted. The essence is to ensure that all research institutes still focus on their mandate in spite of the COVID-19 pandemic, so that we don't lose track of our mandate and focus. Now, having said that, I think the essence of the executive fiat, where the federal government established the National Council on Research and Innovation, is essentially trying to bring, under one umbrella, all these research institutes in such a manner that our energies can be focused towards a particular objective. And then, of course, this will also ensure that funding is streamlined, and then we avoid duplication of R&D. As it is now, yes, it's haphazard. There are so many ministries, doing R&D in different fields, and there is no coordination. But we're trying to get that streamlined so that we can do, such coordination. Again, the economic recovery and growth plan envisage R&D as a functional part, of the process going forward of developing our country. So even in the revised 2020 budget, post-COVID or in COVID and post-COVID budget review, we try to situate, a lot of energy towards R&D, particularly in that relate to health matters and pharmaceuticals. The essence is to reprioritize our energies of government towards that. Now, in terms of incentivizing the private sector, at the moment, I think apart from the tax reliefs that are offered depending on a specific area of research, of course, the government has been able to suspend some taxes that are particularly related to health, pharmaceuticals, and production of PPEs, for health workers. So there's so much tax relief in that area. So any R&D outcome that is geared towards that, it will definitely benefit from such incentives, but normal manufacturing effort or normal R&D effort that relates to manufacturing of general goods and services, perhaps at this moment, I am unable to find any incentive at the moment. But like you notice, the attention globally is towards having a solution to COVID-19 and then mitigating the effects of COVID-19 on the citizens. So all effort are geared towards giving such relief in that area. Like I said, at the moment, I'm at a loss as to whether there are such reliefs in other areas. For instance, government is also looking at aviation, for instance, without necessarily giving incentives, but providing necessary protocols, for resumption of such services. But it does not, I don't think it does include tax reliefs, for such operators. So, but R&D specifically on areas of health, pharmaceuticals, telemedicine, space technology that will encourage telemedicine, communications, and then to some extent some broadband services and data. There's some relief because the government understands that IT has become a very important component, of survival, within a country during the pandemic. So there is so much relief, some sort of relief in that area. So yes, we can provide relief for some tech hubs. Our incubation centers are there to provide so much support and relief to inventors and researchers as much as they can. So yes, we'll be able to support them. However, I agree with you, there is uncoordination, there is poor coordination at the moment of several research efforts by various institutes. They need to be brought under one umbrella so that there will be effective management and coordination. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honourable Minister. And I join Mazi Ohuabunwa in addressing these issues. It's instructive, and we're grateful for that. So let's now go into a question and answer session. I believe the audience, the first question incidentally is for you, Honourable Minister, so you might, as you should stay on and prepare for it. Questions coming, and after that, when we address a few of the questions, I'm not sure we'll have enough time to take all the questions that came in. I'm going to give each panelist a chance to, in 1 minute, summarize their thoughts on the way forward so we can collate all of this for the next thing. So, Honourable Minister, Professor Faborode wants to know if we can assess the success or otherwise of the Nigerian strategy to set up autonomous specialized R&D institutions such as NASENI, RMRDC, FIRO, PRODA, etc., that are not intrinsically linked to universities. But with the level of investment that have gone into them, have the results coming from these independent research institutes, have they matched the quantum of investment that has gone into them? What would you say to that, sir?
Well, I didn't get the question very well because the system is, you are breaking. However, yes, however, if I get you right, you are wondering whether there are results arising out of
from the autonomous R&D institutes, yes, to justify the level of investments that
mention them. Well, yeah. For instance, let me say that in the field of applied research, there has been tremendous efforts and results from these various institutions. I may not have the data of virtually all the institutions, but for instance, in FIRO, they have been able to make breakthroughs in terms of research findings with respect to certain aspects of fiber consumable products, and they've been commercialized, by an industry called Spectra. The Spectra sponsored the research and then went into commercialization, and they're now into manufacturing and production of in commercial quantities. This has, translated into employment, of course, to a lot of teeming Nigerians, and then provided some value chain activities in relation to that production. That is for FIRU, among other things they've done. Then in NARIT, that is the National Research Institute of Chemical Technology, they've been able to provide, at the last count that I know, an organic fertilizer, which is in high demand at the moment. And as we speak, there is so much pressure, on such kind of demand on them. It has been commercialized. It's going through mass production, and as they produce, there are off-takers instantly. Of course, I know, for instance, in biotechnology, they have been able to do to improve seedlings. Even though there are some concerns about GM seedlings, but they've been able to do some for cutting, essentially to revitalize the cotton industry. I mean, the cotton industry, in northern Nigeria, that too has been given out to farmers, and they are working on it. It provides more yield, provides more yield in a very smaller area than it used to be, and it can withstand the pressure of ants and other insecticides. So yes, there are justifications for these institutions, apart from the general services of providing employment for researchers, and then for maintenance workers, for laboratory assistants, etc. So when you look at it from the perspective of public service, yes, they're providing employment. And then when you look at the core objectives of the institutions, yes, they achieve results, and it's justified. Only that the government needs to ramp up more investment in that area, provide more up-to-date and upscale their facilities, that will support their research funding activities.
Very much, Honourable Minister. Dr. Bakari, someone has a question for you. And that, don't you think that there is need to have center for or institute for R&D and research commercialization in Nigerian universities? We know what you are doing, but maybe you should now tell the public what TETFund has done in that regard.
Well, you see, I think we are moving there gradually. When we started, there was this committee that was set up by TETFund to help deepen R&D in our education system, especially in the university system. And we found out that most of the university didn't even have directorates of research in the first place. Now, through collaboration with the NUC, and funding from TETFund, we've been able to now have, each university now has a directorate of research. And we have also provided training for those directorates so that they really understand what it is, for example. In fact, it might be striking to know that some did not understand the concept of R&D in the first place at all. Now, I think we are on the same page. Virtually all the universities do understand the concept of R&D and the need to have one. The need to actually institutionalize R&D in the university system, and also to collaborate with the industry. I think we are moving forward from there. Now we are also providing training for the lecturers. So far, about 600 academic staff have been provided with training or are being trained. An additional 600 will be trained in Germany on groundbreaking research writing grants and project management, so that they can be at par with their colleagues all over the world. Universities are actually supposed to be universal. They have to cease from being a kind of cubicles, here. They have to be universal. They have to be able to compete favorably with their with their institutions and colleagues all over the world. Until we are able to arrive at that stage, we can, if there is a call for research, for example, you won't say that you have to be from Oxford, or the guidelines for Oxford university lecturers will be different from guidelines for, let's say, a university in Tope. The guidelines will be the same. The conditions will be the same. You have to meet the criteria. So what we are trying to do is to provide the capacity, to build the capacity of these institutions, and also build the institutional structures so that they can compete favorably. And then we'll be able to confidently invest our money so that even the industries, people say, why do industries go abroad to look for researchers when it comes to innovation, R&D, when we have so many universities in Nigeria? And I said that, look, nobody will want to invest his money where he is not sure of getting returns. So we are now, it's our duty to build this capacity, and we are building this capacity. Over time, we will reach there, I believe, eventually. Our universities will eventually become hubs, eventually will become hotcakes for industries, and eventually the industries will have a profitable relationship with them. We are going to invest gradually, steadily, but definitely on a continuous basis. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much for that. And I'm sure Mrs. Tifase had your comment about 600 Nigerian researchers who are going to be trained in Germany. She's the president of the Nigerian German Chamber of Commerce and the managing director of Siemens Nigeria, which is a German company. So that's an additional incentive to make sure that we extract the value that they've provided. I keep mentioning Egypt. I took a look at how much that project cost, and we will ensure they do the same in Nigeria. Thank you, Dr. Bakari. So I'm not sure I have enough time to take the other questions, because I want to give all the panelists a chance to make some closing statements so we can have takeaways. And I will call on the Honourable Minister last. He opened this session for us, and we're going to also close with him, because his own statement would now sort of encapsulate and help us to shape the way forward in terms of how we take this engagement forward. So I will ask Mrs. Tifase first, from what we've discussed so far, what stands out for you and what should be the next course of action? Some of the comments we've received incidentally have to do with, okay, so it's all talk. When will these things translate to action? There were a couple of questions to me, so to say, that you've mentioned the Nigeria Triple Helix Roundtable. When will it be operationalized so that we can begin to feel the impact? I will address that when we close the session. Mrs. Tifase, your parting shot.
Thank you. First of all, I want to say thank you to my fellow panelists. Of course, to Mr. Toogun for asking some very insightful questions. I think you've unlocked a lot of intellectual material here that we can all take back and ponder on. But I leave this panel, I leave this interaction more hopeful. I came in here not knowing a lot of what was being done in the government. It's encouraging to hear of it, especially the collaboration with other countries, and across with industry and private sector. But I think we need to go back a bit and start to set a more ambitious agenda for this country and for ourselves as individuals and members of various organizations, and understand that we have the power and the capacity to do a lot more than we've done in the past, and the time, and we're running out of time. The time is now. COVID-19 has only served to create a sense of urgency across the conversations we're having. But I will say this to those listening in and to my fellow panelists: the time is now to stop creating solutions according to the status quo, and to change the game of how we innovate, how we think, how we solve problems. Sometimes it's not following the longest route is not the best. There are shorter ways of doing things. And it's, in general, I leave knowing that there are three things we need to focus on: strategy, structure, and standards. Strategy around why we're doing what we're doing. That is the focus of strategy. You must understand why. You must have a vision, and you must understand clearly how you're going to achieve it. And you must have timelines on how you're going to achieve it. So a lot has been said here, but how does it fit into a broader strategic framework? I know we have the ERGP, that is a broad-based document, but we need to have strategies around what we're calling what we're discussing now around innovation and how it can drive economic development. And must have short-term measures and and it's from the short-term measures and short-term results that we start to see longer-term improvements. So we must have very short-term agenda, things that we can do within 6 months or even less to ensure that Nigerians can start to see the benefits. Structures around how we collaborate, structures around how private sector, industry, academia can come together to address this issue. Also about how we bring in the informal sector, SMEs now are doing additive manufacturing. They're creating masks. I know they're manufacturing products that are helping help us thrive despite the issues around COVID. Smaller businesses are becoming logistics firms, and others are changing their modus operandi, or even their offerings and their portfolio, just to be able to key into the opportunities that COVID has also created. But we must have structures to be able to create a pool of, we are talking about hubs for education, but they're also hubs for manufacturing, and ensuring that these can create and achieve short-term success. Again, what are we setting in the short-term agenda? What is the strategy for those sorts of pockets of industry, and how are we creating structures for them to access funds, access opportunities, but also to speak to one another? And then the last one is standards. A lot of what the short-term gains in other countries who have sort of accelerated their development was they started to set standards for what you can buy. I think Made in Nigeria should be a standard, and it should be something we're all encouraged or even forced to key into. So standards for what we buy, how we produce, how we make decisions around award of contracts, how we make decisions around cooperation with industry and between private sector, standards for what people are, individuals are consuming, standards in general for quality of solutions, quality of processes, and quality of cooperation. So that is for me is some standards, strategy, and structures. I think there are three things that we can focus on out of this and use the Helix Roundtable as a vehicle to ensure some of these objectives are met. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dr. Bakari, your parting shot.
Thank you very much, sir. I should like to join my other senior colleagues once again to thank you for this wonderful opportunity. And I've learned a lot. And also, I would like to say that I think our major problem is it's not just about investing money, because usually what I realize is that the moment you start talking about development in this country, people talk about money. The moment you start talking about changing, status quo, people talk about why is the money, why are the resources? And I believe that you can create money out of nothing. That is the essence of innovation. And I know you, Mr. Tope, being an expert in innovation, will agree with me that countries that make it are actually countries that rely heavily on innovation, that believe in innovation, and that have invested heavily in innovation. And in the final analysis, they become leaders, in the world, in terms of resources, in terms of thinking, in terms of everything. So Nigeria has more than enough resources. When initially, at the beginning, people are talking about our raw materials and raw materials and raw materials. Yes, raw materials constitute only maybe about 10% of what you need. The remaining is our brains. We have to really devote our time and look at the concept of educated unemployment in Nigeria. Virtually everybody in Nigeria is a graduate, moving around with virtually nothing, to contribute to the economy. Largely because the system that produced that graduate did not empower him or her to think within, to look at beyond. You are surrounded by a lot of resources to make money. Unfortunately, because you get a degree, the next thing is you want government employment. And then it takes you 6 years, 7 years without getting that employment. And then the age of certificate, the certificate becomes actually what we have even read or studied, must have forgotten everything. You are just holding the certificate for certificate's sake. I think we really need to think about what do we do to make our universities innovation hubs, to make our polytechnics truly be entrepreneurship institutions that they are meant to be, to make our colleges of education institutions of learning, where we will really have teachers who teach how to think. And this, I think, we have all.
We seem to be having challenges.
Very, very big industry has a very big role to define. Hello? Yeah. So I think And TETFund is ever ready to provide this leadership in terms of investment, in terms of helping to bring together different people from the industry, from government, from academia to move Nigeria forward. That is why we are here. And that is the main focus of the executive secretary now. We are moving towards thinking. We are moving towards investing more properly for the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mazi Ohuabunwa. Can you hear me, sir? Hello? We seem to be having connection problems.
You can hear you. I'm not sure I can hear you.
No, you can't. Honourable Minister, so can we have your closing comments, sir?
Yes. Okay, thank you very much. Like I said earlier.
Minister, I'm back. Can I speak before the minister?
Okay, hey, it's back.
Hold on, Minister, sir. Let's hear from Mazi, then I'll come back to you, sir. Yes, Mazi Ohuabunwa, please go ahead.
This is a coup d'etat.
Yes, Mazi, we're ready for you. We seem to have lost him again. Yes. Honourable Minister, my apologies. Please proceed, sir.
Are you sure I should proceed?
I think so. We've lost him again.
Okay. I was actually saying that we must encourage and support the Nigerian Economic Summit Group, for this kind of conversation. Because the Triple Helix Roundtable is an avenue in which we will hear, from the private sector. We'll also hear from the public sector, and then we'll hear from the researchers and begin to do matchmaking. So we are now going beyond just being into lectures and seminars and workshops. No, we are now going practical. So I think the STI roadmap, for instance, provide the step-by-step approach in that regard. So I'll encourage that we begin to look at that roadmap. Again, from the general discussions we have, I have 2 or 3 takeaways. One is that we need to give incentives rather than to capitalists to support them, towards investing in R&D. And then 2, we need to have an approach in terms of coordination of R&D efforts, from the various institutions to make it very effective. That will result in commercialization, and then we need to promote development of our raw material strategy to support local manufacturing. It is essential we do that. And then the professionals in the industry too must begin to practice and support the principles behind the order, executive order number 5, so that they also leverage on that advantage and begin to ramp up their expertise to support indigenous innovation activities. And then 3, finally, I had Dr. Giri spoke about their efforts in TETFund and universities, but I think that the university system generally must begin to encourage entrepreneurial studies, begin to encourage vocational and skill acquisitions, so that once our children or young men or young women leave their institutions, they'll be able to stand alone and begin to be creative rather than waiting for government to provide jobs for them. So our educational system must be just the Singaporean system, where everybody is meant for skill acquisition. Everybody is trained for skills acquisition rather than academic qualifications. It's important that our efforts are just towards that. It's a pleasure meeting all the panelists. I learned a lot from them. I thank them for their contributions. I look forward to meeting them again, and I hope that these discussions will be compiled, for our collective, implementation going forward. Thank you very much for the opportunity. I wish you all the best. Thank you.
Now I can call on Mazi to fighting shot.
I pray that I don't go off again. I was saying that we have set some lines in the pharmaceutical industry with Nigeria Association of Pharmaceutical Academics, pharmacists, the industrial pharmacists, the Pharmaceutical Manufacturers Group, PMG Man. I have set some timelines for the elimination of certain raw materials and for the establishment of active pharmaceutical ingredient production in Nigeria. And we see the CBN effort to support research and industry as a way to go forward. Now, in conclusion, I have just that first, we must research and innovation must be demand-driven. 2, there must be prioritization and coordination. 3, there should be incentives on research, including appropriate funding and grants, both for research and for adoption. When I talk about adoption, if research is done, we must have a way of motivating industry to adopt. And that's why I talked about using some bit of rebates of the savings from the foreign exchange they will have used importing that goods. If we use it as an incentive to tell them, use this thing locally, it might help. 4thly is accountability, both utilization of research funding, and secondly, the output. What is the accountability? 5th is access to market. And so we must also look at how we can ensure there's return on that investment, not only in Nigeria, but using the African Continental Free Trade Agreement and ECOWAS and all that. Finally, let me acknowledge TETFund. When I used to be chairman of the teaching hospital, one of the universities in Abia State, I was really impressed that TETFund was one institution that was working. Without TETFund today, there have been no infrastructure development in universities across the state, the country. TETFund is doing so well, and now they are going to funding research. I want to acknowledge them and say, let them continue to work in that way, just like CBN is doing. I think these are 2 agencies of government that I think have understood what we need to do. We need to encourage them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mazi Ohuabunwa. And let me quickly emphasize goals, then set context for going forward. So we've heard about the need for agenda setting, that these conversations, we should agree an overarching agenda that deals with strategy, structure, and standards. We've heard a lot about what TETFund is doing, that is resolving some of the complementarity issues and building skills, and also setting up structures within university systems to drive research and innovation. Not just the structures, but also equipping the institutions with the kind of and the people who are there to deliver. And the education sector will key into engagements with industry to move the agenda. Also, research and innovation must be demand-driven. We should set some priorities which fits into the agenda setting and strategy, and we should have coordination. That we should now examine rigorously the need for incentives to private sector players for them to invest in R&D, and that we should resolve through these incentives some of the market failures that are arising, and thereby we can leverage CAFTA access to market beyond Nigeria. The minister has shared with us the need for us to all take a look collectively at the STI roadmap of 2017, and he has taken on board the need for incentives to the private sector. when we pull all of this together, we're looking at two things essentially. We're looking at resolving market failures, and we're also looking at resolving system failures, because those appear to have been the main hindrances preventing us from leveraging. And they also put in bold relief the role that the roundtable that has been established not only by the NESG, but by the NESG and its partners, National Universities Commission and the Tertiary Education Trust Fund. They've collectively come together to put this platform up and ensure that it can serve as a basis, first, to continue these conversations, second, to then look at timelines and moving beyond talk to action, because Nigerians want action. Mrs. Tifase was quite clear that we don't have a lot of time. We need to get things done now. And I think we're all particularly grateful to the Honourable Minister for setting the tone in this conversation. We had a very frank and fruitful discussion. And on that note, I want to thank everyone who's been listening to us for sending in their questions, and more especially all our panelists. I think we've all learned significantly, and indeed we will not stop here. We are collating. We also have reports from the first session we held, including the recommendations that came on how to promote university-industry collaboration. This is building up on that. And we're collating all the reports, and we'll use all of the reports of this and the other sessions we're going to hold to inform the agenda as we continue to facilitate conversations between government, academia, and industry. And I think it is true that if we don't have these moderated conversations, it's difficult for one stakeholder group to know what is occurring in another stakeholder group. Now that we know all the actions, where we know where the touch points are, we know the dots that we have to connect. The next step is for us to proceed and connect those dots. I've been instructed by our communications team that I should request that all of our panelists should please ensure that their cameras are on. They want to take a snapshot of us, as we would do if it was a physical session. Even now in this virtual program, we should all put on our best faces and smile for the next 30 seconds while they take the shot. So 30 seconds. Communications team, over to you.
We should smile, right?
Yes, I'm sure you did. So.
On a final note, if you had enough time, more time, you can invite the DG of NASENI, EVC of NASENI, to speak on the reverse engineering strategy of NASENI. He's a professional. He can bring more light and shed more light on the approach, which we are doing. It's a revolutionary step we've taken.
The reverse engineering.
Yes, sir.
Now that we've heard about that, this is more like a listening session for us. We've got all these sessions planned over the next few months, and we're definitely going to bring the DG of NASENI on in one of the subsequent sessions to where we talk about strategy, where we can begin to unpack that particular approach that they've taken and see how to bring other people into the scope. Let me now execute a coup very briefly by inviting our CEO at the NESG, Mr. Lai Jariola, to make some comments quickly as we close the session.
The man behind the scene.
Well, what comment do you want me to make after you closed it? But anyway, on behalf of the board and members of the NESG, let me thank the Honourable Minister for spending this 2 hours with us. You know, for us at NESG, we are very, very persistent. We will continue. So you haven't seen the end of us. We will come and keep coming. And hope when we come, the doors will be open. I thank you for the time you spent. I thank you for the insightful presentations you've made. I want to thank my past chairman, Mazi. Mazi, it's not me. they must always recognize you. Once the chairman, always the chairman, because all of you have paid to serve this nation. When I tell people that all of our founding fathers, past chairmen, directors, they do all this job without any money, pro bono. People are surprised. If you ask them to move to Abuja anywhere in Nigeria, they got to do, including Tope that you see there. Nobody, none of our volunteers are paid for anything. And I always appreciate the kind of work you all do. So we thank you, past chairman, sir, and for the work you're doing with, and we're still going to use you. You know, you're retired but not tired. And so we'll always get back to you. I want to thank Madam Bakari for representing Professor Bogoro very, very well. I was going to go at the back and fight Professor Bogoro for not appearing, but I'm sure he knows exactly what he has at the summit. At TETFund. That's why he's brought you. You've done a very good work. So our collaboration continues. And I reserve the last to my vice chair, my sister Onyeche Tifase. Thank you, and thank you again. This is a continuing conversation. What I hear all through the discussion is that it's time for action. I mean, enough of planning, it's time for action, and we should act. I hear the fact that we need to be a lot more inclusive. I mean, so private sector, public sector, every one of us, we need to. It's time to think Nigeria, not at levels, not at public-private. We all belong to Nigeria. We all have stake in Nigeria. It's time for us to have a mind, change the mindset. It can never be business as usual. Things are changed. All over the world, we talk about new normal. Before now, putting this program together will mean that we all have to travel to Abuja, do what? We see we're doing this program now very easily. So mind change is very important. And I hear that we need to be smart about it. We don't have sufficient resources to dissipate anyhow. We must be smart, we must be specific, it must be relevant and focused. So again, I want to thank you, and we'll come back again. Thank you most sincerely. Over to you.
Thank you.
Thank you all. And until we come your way again with the next discussion, it's goodbye for now.
Thank you
very much. God bless you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, Mazi. It was good to see you.
Bye-bye.
Bye, sir. Bye-bye. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.